Hello everybody, this is your video lecture for Chapter 1, Section 2. It starts on page 32 of your book. We've been talking about the different peoples in the different regions. We talked about the Aleut and the Inuits, the Eskimos in their igloos, living in the tundra. We talked about people of the West. Remember, the Pomo women wove beautiful baskets that they used to gather food, and they were woven so tightly that they could hold water. We also talked about a little bit about the peoples of Mexico and the Aztecs, and how the Aztecs were a great empire that used an irrigation system, and they drained the swamps, but they also were warlike people and attacked their neighbors and used the prisoners for human sacrifice. We also talked a little bit about the peoples of the Southwest. Now we're on page 35 in the middle. These are the people in our area, the Hohokam and the Anasazi. They lived in the great big Pueblo homes that had many different rooms. And they used the ladders to get up onto each level. So today we're going to talk about peoples of the Great Plains. So we're at the bottom of page 35. Oh, I forgot to tell you guys, this guy here on the right, he's called a Kachina. So every summer, the Hopi and Zuni and other Pueblo Indians, natives, pardon me, hold a religious celebration, and it's a ceremony called on the Kachinas, or spirits of the ancestors. So the Pueblo people believe the Kachinas had the power to bring a plentiful harvest. At the festival, masked dancers play the role of different Kachinas. So for every, they have a Kachina, I believe, for everything: crops, rain, homes, just everything. So they danced and they sang songs to bring rain to the year ahead. So I'm told one of my students last year said that somehow the Kachinas became angry with their tribe, and so her grandma would not take her onto the reservation because she was afraid that the Kachinas would get the kids. And so it's a very huge part of their culture and their belief, and the stories she told me were very frightening, so I would be afraid of the Kachinas also, because you don't want to make them angry. So the Kachinas are used by the people here in our area. So let's talk about the people of the Great Plains. So farther north, the Great Plains is a flat grassland region stretching from the Mississippi River west to the Rocky Mountains. So today most people think of the Plains Indians on horseback, but originally there were no horses at all. The horses did not show up until the Spanish brought them during this time. So can you imagine being a Native American and you're hanging out wherever you live, and all of a sudden this guy walks by on a horse? I'm sure it was slightly terrifying to see one for the first time. But also the Plains group were nomads, which meant they followed the food around. Others lived in villages by rivers where land was easier to farm. They could use irrigation to feed their crops. In the summer, entire villages set out to track bison. So hunting bison on foot was difficult because they're four-legged, very large creatures. But the plain natives use their environment to help them. So working together, the villagers stampeded the herd over a cliff. So the fall over the cliff would disable the animals and they would die, or they would kill them if they weren't dead yet. So Plains natives not only ate the bison's meat, but they also made the hide into clothes, used its bones, made them into tools. So during this time, you guys remember, they use every single part of the animal. Nothing went to waste. So if you guys can think like back to the Lion King, the cartoon, when little Simba's in the valley there and all of the water buffalo are running towards him, they would herd all of the bison into an area like that and run them off a cliff. Pretty strategic, actually. So in the winter, such northern plains groups and Mandans and Pawnee lived in large circular lodges. Wooden beams held up the earthen walls. A hole at the top provided air, light, and an outlet for smoke from the fire. Buried partly underground, the earth lodge protected the people from the extreme cold and wind of the plains climate. The spiritual beliefs of plains tribes varied. Some felt a close tie to regional animals, such as the bison, or plants, such as corn. Some honored many sacred places, like the Black Hills of South Dakota and Wyoming. And many plains tribes held a ceremony called the Sun Dance, which involved making a vow and asking the Creator for aid. So, let's rewind a little bit. The Aztecs, the people of Mexico, I wanted to show you their capital. So this is Tenochtitlan. These are the structures that they would create, and on top would be where they would place their living quarters. So it's kind of like a big pyramid. Here's a map from 1524 of Tenochtitlan in Mexico. This is the capital line. It looks very primitive based on our maps today. This is the best that they could do at the time with the tools they had. So let's review here. Here's a picture of the Inuit Eskimo with his igloo. Here's the Pomo women basket, but I wanted to show you guys the Great Plains earthen lodge that they would live in. So part of it was underground. There's a hole up here in the top, and the grass would end up growing on the top, and it would stay very cool in the summer and very warm in the winter. And they would cover the doors with a thick canvas or blanket or brushes or trees. So that is what the Great Plains Native Americans lived in. So for your notes, we're going to write, they had no horses at this time. The Spanish brought them over. Some were nomadic and followed the food around, while others were farmers. They lived in these large, round, earthen lodges. 3 facts for the Great Plain natives. Okay. The people of the Southeast, which stretches from Texas to the Atlantic Ocean, has mild winter, warm summers, and plenty of rain. The long growing season led the Choctaw and the Chickasaw and other southeastern groups to become farmers. Lots of rain equals lots of farming. As many other natives did, they grew corn, beans, squash, and pumpkins. Women did most of the farming, which is kind of cool, while men hunted, fished, and cleared the land. The men spent months in the forest tracking deer. In the Southeast, people traced their family ties through the women. So societies in which ancestry is traced through the mother is called matrilineal. So this tribe focuses on the mother's side of the ancestry, and that's how they trace back through their lineage. People gathered at a central square for public meetings and such religious ceremonies as the Green Corn Festival. It's held once a year. It offers thanks for the corn harvest and also served as a kind of New Year's celebration. People clean their homes, they throw away old pots, they settle quarrels as a sign of a fresh start for the year. So there's a piece of their culture that's kind of moved over into our culture where we celebrate the New Year. Miss Cantwell is going to be so excited to celebrate a new year after this 2020 that we have had. I don't know about you guys. So, in your notes for the people of the Southeast, women did most of the farming, men hunted, and they have a matrilineal society where their ancestry is traced through the mother. You can also find these notes on Google Classroom under classwork to copy down while I'm talking as well. So let's talk about peoples of the eastern woodlands. So the eastern woodlands, they have rain, much colder and snowy winters. Forests cover the region. But we're going to talk about the Iroquois. So like all Native Americans, the Iroquois learned to live in their environment. They hunted wild game. They adapted the forest for farming by using slash and burn agriculture. This was one of your vocab words. In slash and burn agriculture, farmers chopped down and then burned trees on a plot of land. And the ashes from that fire would enrich the soil so that they could grow really good crops. But once the field soil became worn out, they completely abandoned that field and go clear a new field. They lived in long houses, bark-covered shelters as long as 300 feet long. So one longhouse held about 8 to 10 families. They were pretty big. For protection, they surrounded their villages with high fences made of poles. They often needed protection not only from the enemies of the Iroquois, but from each other. So the Iroquois often raided their neighboring villages for food and captives. They kind of attacked each other. But in the late 1500s, here's another one of your vocab words. 5 northern Iroquois nations took the advice of a peace-seeking man named Daganoweda. They stopped warring with each other. They stopped fighting. Excuse me. Sorry guys, I had to pause and cough. So they stopped fighting and they formed an alliance called the Iroquois League. So this league brought on a long period of peace to the Iroquois. A council of leaders from each nation governed the league. They followed the Great Law of Peace, and they also were a matrilineal society, meaning ancestry was traced through the mother. And if the leader did something wrong, the women of the clan would vote him out of office. They would boot him right out. So the women did the vote. So this is kind of where women start to play a role in the tribes and how they work. So across the Atlantic, the people of West Africa were also adapting to their environment and engaging in trade. And West Africa was the region from which most Africans were brought to the Americas. We're going to learn about that in the next section. So please go write down all these notes. The people of the eastern woodlands, they used slash and burn agriculture. They also lived in wigwams. Here's a picture of a wigwam. Structure was kind of like a dome. They could also be rectangular. Iroquois often raided their neighbors for food and prisoners, and Daganoweda was their peace-seeking leader who brought peace to all the different Iroquois tribes. So again, you need to write all these down because before the test, this note will disappear. And so hopefully you have them in your notebook. If you have any questions, email me, let me know. You guys are all set.